Now, the Victorian Electoral Commission has some explaining to do. Their sinister attempt to intimidate Andrew Bogut is reminiscent of the type of antics you'd expect in a despotic hellhole, not the state of Victoria. The Victorian Electoral Commission has threatened the basketball star with prosecution for social media posts critical of the Dan Andrews government's pandemic laws and the 3 crossbenchers who voted for those laws. Threatening to fine a private citizen for sharing their political beliefs is dangerous overreach. The former NBA star is perfectly entitled to criticise elected officials and post videos encouraging his social media followers to vote out what he sees as underperforming MPs. Andrew Bogut has said that athletes are right now too scared. They've been muzzled about sharing their views against lockdown. Have a listen to this.
Athletes that are on contract in our biggest leagues in Australia, AFL, NRL, whatever you want to call it, they've been told you are not to make anti-lockdown, anti-government statements on social media, period, no matter how drastic they are, because it affects our league staying open and you getting a salary.
Now, the video Andrew posted features Animal Justice MP Andrew Medic, Reason Party leader Fiona Patten, and Victorian Greens MP Samantha Ratnam, or as I've referred to them, Dan's useful idiots. And the video encourages Victorians to vote them out. That's it. Today, a Victorian Electoral Commission spokeswoman said any post shared by Bogut relating to electoral matters must carry authorisation under the law. Spokeswoman Ruth Murphy said any individual who posted critical comments that related to electoral matters without an authorisation as required by law could face penalties of up to $26,000. But Bogut is not running for office or speaking on behalf of any political party. Constitutional lawyer Professor Greg Craven today blasted the Victorian Electoral Commission's actions.
Absolutely astonishing. I think the Victorian Electoral Commission is guilty of constitutional drivel. In this country, we have a freedom of political communication. There's no doubt that this is squarely in there. If that is the case, then virtually every political story in the Age or the Sydney Morning Herald or the Australian should have a line of disclosure in it. If that's the case, then every program on every channel and every newspaper should carry it. Now, that is absolutely absurd, and you'd have to ask the question of why poor old Andrew Bogut has been singled out. It's interesting that no one has been singled out with the opposite point of view. I think the Electoral Commissioner is guilty of vast overreach, and he should retreat as quickly as decently possible.
Now, if the Victorian Electoral Commission was being consistent, they'd be sending those sorts of threatening notices to tens of thousands of other Victorians who have made similar posts on social media, including columnists and commentators. Wonder if I'll be receiving an official caution from the Victorian Electoral Commission. And if you think this is just a big joke, if Bogut is fined and refuses to pay, he could end up in jail.
Can you imagine the political and legal consequences if a person was actually committed to prison for simply publishing his own private political view? Australia would be a laughingstock in terms of human rights around the world.
Andrew Bogut will be joining me shortly to talk about what he will do in response to this intimidation. Now, staying in Victoria, and not for the first time, the Dan Andrews government has performed a spectacular backflip that proves yet again that political considerations, not the best available health advice, is determining COVID policies. The latest about-face came after sustained criticism of the unnecessary and cruel cancellation of IVF treatment. We covered the issue heavily on this program this week, and thank God there has been a backflip. And that backflip illustrates that the COVID-induced lunacy we continue to enjoy in this country will only come to an end when we demand it does. As long as we obediently, unquestionably follow restrictions, no matter how ineffective or harebrained they seem, they'll keep on imposing them. Remember the ban on playgrounds and skate parks, or the outdoor mask mandates, or the curfew? Just some of the illogical, non-evidence-based measures imposed on Victorians. The playground ban was reversed only because of the public backlash and because of non-compliance of parents. In fact, the day the ban was lifted, the state recorded significantly higher numbers than when it was imposed. The government's latest ban on IVF left thousands of Victorian women distraught, with some patients and specialists publicly pleading with Premier Andrews to reconsider the decision. And for some of those women, it could have been the difference between becoming mothers and being deprived of that chance. There are strict age limits for IVF, and for women such as Melanie, who posted that video, a 3-month pause could have heartbreaking, lifelong consequences. Melanie's viral video really brought home the cruelty of the ill-considered health directive. For the 1 in 8 Australian women who have fertility issues, IVF is not a choice, and politicians should never be allowed to deprive women of the opportunity to become mothers. Now, this week we saw the Victorian government again and again defend that decision, but today, thank God, they relented.
So decisions were made based on advice. It's now appropriate to have another look in the context of things as they are unfolding, to kind of start with a worst case position and then try and reinstate whatever you can. I'm very pleased that the public health team, the Chief Health Officer, has reviewed his advice and the Minister's accepted that and been able to make a new decision under the new Act to reinstate IVF services, and the orders will be effective immediately, and that is a very good outcome. I apologise for any distress, for any concern.
But the question remains, how was this daft decision made in the first place, when it was clear that it would do nothing to relieve pressure on the hospital system and would only devastate thousands of women, some of whom are undergoing their final rounds of infertility treatment? Those working in this sector had made it clear to the government that the specialist nature of their workforce meant doctors and nurses could not be redeployed elsewhere, and the facilities and equipment used would not interfere with the pandemic response. We had leading fertility specialist Dr. Lynn Burmeister saying just that on this station.
We don't use the resources that are needed for COVID patients. We use one needle. The patients are under sedation the whole time. They're not intubated. It takes me 15 to 20 minutes to collect eggs. The patients go home within 2 hours of the procedure. They don't get admitted to the hospital. It makes no logical sense at all. The staff are not being deployed to work in public hospitals where they are struggling with COVID patients. And also, my fertility nurses can't work on a ward with COVID patients. They wouldn't know what to do. They're specialised fertility nurses.
In the end, this was a victory for common sense and a victory for compassion. But we should not forget about all those suffering needlessly waiting for elective surgery to be resumed. Of course, Victoria's hospital system would not be under stress if Premier Andrews had delivered on his promise of 4,000 additional ICU beds.